This is a production of Cornell University.
Okay, there we go. Oh, lining. All right, so I want to give some background information on myself. I know I won't go through too much of it. Some of you may have read my CV, and I know Steve just shared some information. But I always like to share this first point, which is that I'm a two-time HBCU alum. I think that's important in the context of the work that we'll be doing with the ILSI Lab, and this work we'll be doing that I'll share a little bit later. Because a lot of my development, a lot of who I am was cultivated when I was a student at two HBCUs, which, as Steve mentioned, was Florida A&M University and North Carolina A&T State University. He mentioned that I went to Penn State University, and now I hold the position of Associate Dean for Diversity, Equity, Inclusion and Faculty Affairs in the Purdue Polytechnic Institute, which is one of the 11 colleges at Purdue University. And I've been a professor now for almost 20 years. My first 5 years I spent at Iowa State University. I was there for 5 years. We have cyclones over here. Thank you. You ought to know about cyclones. Right? So I had cyclones in the audience. I spent my first 5 years there. And then the last 13 years, starting my 13th year now at Purdue University, have been spent in the College of Ag. So I know the College of Ag very well, that context. And so a lot of the things I'll be dealing with as administrator in Purdue Polytechnic are similar to that, which was in the College of Ag as well. As I mentioned, as a professor, here my interests, as you see on the screen, educational access and equity, with a focus on Black graduate students. That's what people know me about in terms of my work. I also have made my career on the space of mentoring as well, on Black land grants, which are the 1890s, as many of you may know, and the education and professional ability of Black graduate students and faculty. I'm also the director of the Mentoring of Purdue program, or the MAP program, as we like to call it. I'll share more about the MAP program a little bit later. And I'm also senior research associate at the Rutgers Center for Minority Serving Institutions, which is the only center in the country that focuses on minority serving institutions. It's the largest. And so by my engagement with that and that role I have access to over 750 minority serving institutions. So that's an added benefit working with ILSI that you all can benefit from by my engagement with Rutgers. And I'm also a Fulbright scholar. Funny thing about being a Fulbright, they keep delaying when I can leave, right? So originally I was supposed to leave in 2020, I believe it was, 21 maybe, but no, 20. But they aren't handling things well with the pandemic. So keep extending it out. And I just received an email the other day that says that I may be able to leave in 2023, but they are going to honor my Fulbright, and I'll be at the University of Southern Queensland in Australia. And so that's and I've engaged in other international spaces as well. All right, so I want to start off with an overview of today's presentation. And so this is my goal for today, everyone. Provide you with understanding of how to increase STEAM, or science, technology, engineering, agriculture, and math, STEAM, diversity through the development of collaborative partnerships with MSIs, minority serving institutions. So that's the ultimate goal for today, is to achieve this goal. And that's overview. Then there are three goals that I want to focus on today. One, I want to highlight some programs, two programs in particular, that we created at Purdue University to enhance diversity, equity, inclusion, and STEAM access for students from historically underrepresented backgrounds. I'm going to highlight efforts from our USAID-supported project focusing on collaboration between USAID and innovation labs and MSIs. And I'm also going to highlight two USAID projects that focus on the development of partnerships between historically white, predominantly white institutions and MSIs. So that's kind of the roadmap, if you will, for today. So first thing I want to do is focus on collaborative partnerships, and I want to define it and share with you. Many of you all know what that means, but I like this definition by Himmelman, 1992, which is collaborative partnership is alliance among people and organizations, multiple sectors, such as schools, businesses working together to achieve a common purpose. I like this definition of what it means to be a collaborative partnership. But what I want to focus on today, everyone, I appreciate, I met with students right before this session, and one of the students asked me, said, Dr. Esters, why is it that schools like Cornell don't engage partnerships or collaborations with minority serving institutions. So here's some importance. I'm going to talk through this. First, I'm going to focus on the importance of collaborating with MSIs. One is they can expand human capital and technical expertise, right? That's one. Also, which is kind of unfortunate, MSIs do have strengths that would enhance collaborative partnerships. But oftentimes, as I said, told the students this morning, that the majority of institutions don't look at MSIs as they often look at them as through a deficit lens, right? Not that they have strengths that they bring to the table. It's an effective strategy to help advance diversity, equity, inclusion, and broader participation of students in STEAM. It's lasting benefits for all institutions. I know Steve and Holly and I and our team want to see just that with this project. I'm going to share with you a little bit later. It also can result in institutions being change agents. There's a greater likelihood for more impact being made by collaborating with MSIs. And there's a greater ability to address the global grand challenge by collaborating with MSIs. So all these right here, ladies and everyone, are reasons why collaborating with MSIs are important. Okay, so keep these things in mind as you move forward. So unfortunately, this also kind of responds to the students' question when we were meeting a little bit ago. Oftentimes, when institutions such as Cornell, Penn State, or Purdue reach out to MSIs, you have to understand that MSI is thinking in terms of what's in it for me, right? And oftentimes, MSIs are frequently targeted by partners, but they are often not valued in a relationship, is what I refer to as this little brother approach, right? And so that's the reason why there's often skepticism on the part of MSIs when Purdue or Penn State knocks on their door saying, would you work with us? So that's one thing you need to be aware of. Second, so how can you address this? One way, and I'll talk a little bit about this later, is developing a memorandum of understanding on agreements. That goes a long way by ensuring there's a level playing field. And also, you need to understand that MSIs of all types, HSIs, which are Hispanic serving institutions, HBCUs, ANAPESIs, which are Asian American, Native Pacific honor institutions, they all have value that they bring to the table in research, teaching, and in extension outreach. So there's value, clearly there's value by engaging with MSIs. That's even more reason why schools, institutions such as Cornell should engage with them. So how do you engage, right? That's one question that often comes up. And I want to make sure I go through this, and Steve and I and our team and Holly and others are going to be making, where's my mics in the place? The mic right here. So we'll be embarking on some trips very soon. So first thing you need to understand, when you want to engage with MSIs, you have to make multiple visits. You cannot just make one visit. One visit is not going to work. You have to make multiple visits to these institutions. Why? Because you have to build a relationship with these individuals at these institutions. You have to have exploratory conversations, especially if it's a new institution. You have to learn about the institution and the culture. The culture at Florida A&M is different than North Carolina A&T, which is different from Tuskegee University. All these institutions, the culture of HBCU is different from that of ANAPESI, which is different from that of HSI, or Hispanic serving institution. So the only way you can learn about the institutions is by making visits to these institutions. That's why it's important. You can get invited talks. A lot of other things that you can do. You can have exchange opportunities, faculty exchanges. So it's not just about you leaving Cornell and going to Tuskegee. Bring faculty from Tuskegee, North Carolina A&T, Florida A&M to Cornell, to Penn State, to Purdue. Student research exchange opportunities, bringing students to Cornell, but also sending students from Cornell to North Carolina A&T. There's nothing wrong with doing those sorts of exchange agreements. Collaborative projects is another approach. Research, teaching. Many of you all may know this, that MSIs do very well when it comes to teaching. Why? Because the majority of the appointments of faculty are that of being instructors. So they, in many ways, master the art of teaching in many ways. You also have extension outreach opportunities that you can engage with. And you also have grant proposals. that you can do. So here are just some many ways that you can engage with MSIs. So I would encourage all of you who are thinking about engaging to give these some consideration as you move forward.
Just in case it doesn't advance.
Okay. Oh, thank you. Yeah, it was this right here.
Okay.
All right. So next I want to move to development collaborative relationships. Some things to think about. So one thing you need to make sure that you do is that you identify common needs and shared interests. Right? Remember we talked earlier about MSI is thinking about what's in it for me by engaging with Cornell. Right? It needs to be mutual respect. Steve and I and Mike and Holly are going to go visit Tuskegee, Delaware State, some other institutions. There has to be mutual respect. If you start off on the wrong foot, and that respect is not there, then the likelihood that that relationship will flourish in the future is less so. Make sure you keep in mind there's benefits for all institutions involved. Right? Don't look at this through a deficit lens. Think about the potential for sustainability. Is this a long-term project that you're embarking on? What's the potential for long-term impact that can happen from, that can result from the project? And also, I mentioned this earlier, shared understanding. How can the shared understanding of expectations be made clear through and maintained through a MOU or MOA, memorandum of understanding or agreement? So this is how, and you see the title here, I talked about reciprocal and equitable. The spirit of those two elements need to be maintained throughout that partnership. Is it equitable? And is it reciprocal? Okay. So here's some pitfalls to avoid. So I've shared with you all things you must do, right? What are some things you need to avoid? Yeah. One, a lack of respect. Because let me tell you, if you engage with an MSI and things go south, as they say, rest assured that those institutions will share that experience with other MSIs. They'll say, don't engage with Cornell, don't engage with Purdue University. So you need to have respect. Selfish motives, which is usually the case oftentimes in these relationships. You go into it thinking about what's in it for me, Cornell University. The lack of authentic engagement. Again, think about MSIs and they've been engaging with PWIs for years and years. They understand and see and know what it feels like to be in a relationship that lacks authentic engagement. A lack of understanding of MSI context. How you learn about the context? Visiting the institution. Traveling down to Tuskegee. Traveling to Florida A&M. Traveling to Purdue A&M University. That's how you learn about the context. Cold call. We talked about that this morning with the students. Just getting on the phone. I mean, yeah, you can make some headway in that using that approach, but by and large, you usually won't result in much. And this is one that I was speaking with someone this morning about this 11th-hour request. I had this point this morning, waiting to the absolutely last minute. Hey, Tuskegee, I got 20,000 I want to give. Could you join us? That's not a good way to start that relationship. These are pitfalls that you should avoid when you're trying to engage with minority serving institutions. So next I want to talk about something I share with the students. I keep pointing to you, right? I want to share with you information about the Mentoring at Purdue program. This is the program I'm the director of. Mentoring at Purdue, or the MAP program, has been around now for 10 years. We started in 2012, which I'll share now, or 13. So we started this in 2013. And the reason why we started this program, and when we started the program, I always like to tell the story. Me and a colleague actually crafted the genesis of the idea on a cocktail napkin in the Memphis airport. And my colleague lost the napkin. I don't know how he did that or why he did that. I talk about him all the time. How do you do that? Whatever. But we actually crafted it out. So we thought through this program. It wasn't the Mentoring at Purdue program. It was just a program we wanted to address mentoring. And the reason why this program came about was because in 2011 or 12, our College of Ag had gone through a external review by the U.S. Civil Rights Commission. We got hammered, absolutely hammered. Diversity was very low in every department. Our students, undergrad, graduate students, faculty, climate and culture was just not good. So I had access to the report already. And me and my colleagues said, well, how can we move the needle and address some of the issues? We thought about this idea of addressing it through mentoring. So that's how, in a nutshell, how the MAP program came about. And that's the goal. We want to focus on enhancing the spirit of a culture of mentoring within the College of Ag, especially as it relates to women and students of color. Right? So tied to mentorship and then offering best practices. So that in a nutshell is the MAP program. So within the MAP program, so we have a framework for the MAP. I love showing this thing, it's a house, right? I love showing this. And so this framework showcases to you the structure of the MAP program. So at the roof, you have two types of support when it comes to mentoring. It's two pillars, instrumental and psychosocial. Instrumental, those things related to career related, and psychosocial, those related to like empathy, friendship, those sorts of things. Then you have the MAP program, which is the structure. Then there are two areas of the MAP program. You have the graduate retention side of things, right? And then you have the Gateway to Purdue, which is the outreach component. These cultural centers here that I mentioned earlier to the students, we have support and we collaborate with all these cultural centers at Purdue. Black Cultural Center, Latino, LGBTQ Center, and also multicultural programs, which is housed in the College of Agriculture. And so again, the Gateway Purdue is focused on recruitment. And then we also have the retention side of things. Let me back up. So we have the retention side, let me go back here, and the retention is addressed, which is issues of retention addressed through workshops and seminars. Actually, today we have a workshop. Our workshops go on, our seminars go on every Wednesday at the lunch hour, once a month. We have an invited lecture series, which I'll showcase to you in a little bit, and we have a peer mentoring program. And then for the recruitment side of things, we have the Summer Scholars Program, a resource guide, and we also have a MAP newsletter. So this is all 6 of these things are within the portfolio of the MAP program. So this is our structure of the MAP program. You always ask, what is the MAP program? This is it right here. So here's some impact. We keep data. I'm a social scientist, education researcher. So we keep data, assessment, and here's just some highlights of the impact. We've done over 65 workshops and seminars, over 1,800 faculty, staff, and grad students at Purdue University have been reached. 70% of the workshops, webinars are rated as highly effective. We won 2 national awards, and we also won the Vita Costa Award, which is an award administered from one of the women's centers at Purdue University. So we've done a pretty good job, I would say, over the last 10 years as relates to the MAP program. These are our institutional partners with the MAP program. There are 19 historically Black land grants, or 1890s. We have relationships with a majority. I think there may be 2 that are missing. But you have one here, Alabama A&M, Alcorn State. I'll turn this way. Who is it? Central State University, Delaware State, Florida A&M. We have HSI, Florida International. Fort Valley, Kentucky State, Langston, Oklahoma. Lincoln University, which is in Missouri. North Carolina A&T, Purdue A&M. Southern University, Baton Rouge, Louisiana, Tennessee State, Tuskegee, University of Arkansas, Pine Bluff, University of Maryland, Eastern Shore, and Virginia State University. So all these institutions are partners with the MAP program. So you can see why I think it's safe to say that the work that Mike and Steve and Holly and I are going to engage in, we can build on these relationships that I have with the 1890s. So I'm going to go through some of the components of the Summer Scholars Program. So the Summer Scholars Program is a program we developed where we bring students in from 1890s to Purdue who have an interest in graduate school. They stay a week, fly them in, feed them, we engage them in seminars and workshops about education, you name it. And this is a picture of the 2019 Summer Scholar. Some of the students where they're from. And this is what the program does. Students visit departments, they engage with future faculty members, they explore research opportunities, they learn about the graduate application process, and again, all expenses are paid. So we've been doing this. The first year we did MAP Summer Scholars Program was in 2014, I believe, 15. We had started out with 2 institutions. As the saying goes, right, Rome wasn't built today. Started with 2 institutions, Florida A&M and North Carolina A&T, primarily because I attended those institutions. And then you saw that last slide, now it's ballooned into 19 institutions. And our all-time high, the first year we had 12 students, and our highest was in 2019, we had 35 students. And many of those students have gone on to graduate and pursue and receive their master's and PhD from Texas A&M, Illinois, Penn State, Purdue, all over the country. And this, I love this picture. This is the picture from the 2019 cohort. I love this picture. I would frame this picture, put it in my office if I could, I should. And this picture is of not only the scholars themselves, but also some of our staff. So you can see diversity is abound in this picture. I just love it every time I see it, it gives me chills. We had 2020, we canceled the MAP program, Summer Scholars, but this year we brought it back in a virtual manner. 20 students this past June. We had students, so we shared this across the country. We actually added students, we opened up a little bit. We had a student from Spelman University. We had a student from North Carolina State University. But the virtual program was a really good program. You see the dates. That was a flyer we disseminated on our social media. I don't know what we'll do next year. We may do virtual, we may do in person. I kind of want to go back and do it in person. We'll see. Here's some other information I shared with you earlier. This is an example of the our newsletter, the roadmap. I like that play on words, right? The roadmap to success. And we do this about 3 times a year. And this is a resource guide called Mapping Out Your Future. It's 10 words. There you go. And this resource guide focuses on all these elements. GRE, templates for letters, ask for letters of recommendation, how to reach out to a professor, all these sorts of things. It's a nice resource guide. In the newsletter, you see the newsletter we distributed to our stakeholders, highlights events, highlights members of our team, so on and so forth. Here are flyers. You can see how we advertise our workshops. So this is a lot from this past spring. So students, we talked about what are some of the topics we focus on. Every topic that we focus on for our monthly seminar, it must intersect your mentoring. Everyone. As director, I made that clear. So you see here, we talked about mentoring BIPOC grad students for careers in culinary fields, how I shared the mentoring, our bio lecture series, and then building your brand and mentoring for entrepreneurial activities. So we brainstorm this. We collect assessment data. We ask participants, and what are some topics you want to hear? And then this is an example of our invited lecture series. This past year we had Dr. Stephanie Page, who's a phenomenal woman, scholar. And she focused on mentoring beyond hierarchies, applying intersectionality, inclusion, and intentionality as frameworks. So this is the 8th year we've had the invited lecture series. We're bringing a prominent speaker from across the country to talk about something related to mentoring, STEM, career development, so on and so forth. And ironically, maybe not ironically, but this is what happens is that every speaker we've had has been a woman of color, every single one, 8 years running. So it's not just that I talk about diversity, we engage in a thoughtful manner with intentionality. We've had Angela Byers Winston, some of you may know. We've had, forget her name, Simmons College. Stacy Blake Beard, who's a phenomenal mentoring researcher. Erica Camacho, who's at Arizona State. She's a mathematician, scholar. So yeah, we have pretty good networks around the country. We have a peer mentoring program we started. Well, actually, I didn't start it. My grad student started. They said, Dr. E, they call me Dr. E, at Purdue. Dr. E, we want to come up with a mentoring program. I said, okay, make it work. And what I did was talk about it. Let's think about it. And so Tori Crops, who's now a former PhD student of mine, she's a postdoc at Rice University. Melissa Hester here was a doc student of mine. And this is a picture they did a painting with a twist as a social activity. But this is the peer mentoring program was not a peer program, peer match program. It was kind of organic. Students met once a month. They had an application process. Students applied. They engaged. They met twice a month, excuse me. They met twice a month. They talked about how things were going in their labs, how to prepare for various job opportunities, CV, editing your CVs and resumes, those sorts of things. I never attended the meetings unless I was invited. That was just a rule we said. I will not come unless you ask me. And I can't with you, Johnson, we want me to present on various things or address certain issues. All right, so we had the MAP program, and then we actually, offshoot of the MAP program was we had another program called a mentor. We have a $750,000 grant from USDA, and the goal of the mentor program was to establish collaborative capacity building partnerships from 1862 to 1990s. And the second goal was to empower faculty leadership teams to develop mentoring programs at the institutions. And here are the partners for this mentor grant project. From the likes of Alabama, Indiana, Penn State, UK, Missouri, Nebraska, Lincoln. And you see we have a network of 13 institutions, 11 faculty leadership teams because Penn State was the evaluator and Purdue already had a MAP program. And we put on monthly webinars, progress updates, feedback sessions. We have annual conference, and this is our nice little logo, mentor. So the mentor project was an offshoot from the MAP program. So I'm going to move into, I'm almost done. I want to focus on this next thing, which is Feed the Future Innovation Labs and MSI Collaboration, which is how I'm engaged with students in the group. So something that many of you know about is that despite the strengths, there still has not been much progress made in USA to increase the collaboration between innovation labs and MSI. Literature states this, and I've talked to plenty of folks who support that. So just to give you some context on MSI collaboration, MSIs are prepared. Many folks may not understand and know that MSIs are actually prepared to engage in collaboration for these reasons, and they possess many strengths. One, they have extensive experience working with population who reflect ethnic diversity. They have cultural sensitivity when they work with populations, various populations. They have well-established networks. Many faculty MSIs are international themselves, right? So they have those connections. They have considerable academic experience, of course. They are familiar with the constraints experienced by low-income, dispersed communities. And they also have enthusiasm. They want to engage with the likes of Cornell and Purdue and other institutions. So all these things that are listed here showcase to you why, how, and to what extent MSIs are primarily ready to engage in collaboration. So how this came about, how I ended up meeting Steve, right? Someone from Texas A&M reached out to me a year ago in the summer. He said, Dr. Esters, you were recommended to us and we want you to engage in a consultancy project. And there were 4 tasks that they asked me to do for this project. Conduct an anonymous survey in advance of this work session that I was to conduct to identify current knowledge, practice, and concerns about innovation labs. Develop an agenda for a work session in collaboration with USA. Facilitate a 90-minute virtual session. And then also provide a written report which summarizes session discussion, conclusions, and recommendations. So me and a student by the name of Victoria Park, who's a master's student of mine, embarked upon this journey. And we did what USA, in this case on behalf of Texas A&M, wanted us to do. And as a result of that, things started to snowball. It's like a solid ball coming down the field, right? And the first innovation lab that reached out to me was the one that existed at Purdue University. Haley Oliver, who received a PhD from Cornell University in food science. She represents the Food Safety Innovation Lab. And so she came up with this idea, or I assisted with this idea of, this idea was creating RFA. So by and large, the degree to which MSIs are engaged with innovation labs is through being a subaward. That's what it is. Here's some money, go do a project. Right? It's okay, right? But what Haley and Steve in this case in this team were thinking that next level. And so in Haley's case, when she brought me on board, we came with this idea of an RFA program that we focused on MSIs on. That was the focus. They would get a nice chunk of change, if you will. We would choose 2 institutions, and they would lead their own USA projects. And it was very successful. I don't have the numbers, but it was really successful, this call out. It was pretty extensive too. Here's some approaches. Focus on early career faculty and researchers, subcontracting to a degree with the FISL. Well, we were engaged in terms of the administrative work. There's a lot of red tape, a lot of paperwork. We developed a custom email list developed by Rutgers Center for University Institutions, which I mentioned earlier I'm a part of. And we had a modified RFA process. So this has been a successful program. I can't recall if Haley announced it to, but we did identify the 2 institutions out of the pool of 10. It came down to 10. And the second project was a project that I'm here representing. I can't say enough about Steve and Holly and Mike and the whole team, Anna and Levon and everyone. And it's called the MSI Research Fellowship Program. And this is the goal of the program, very simple. For those of you who don't know, increase the number of women, LGBTQ communities, underrepresented minorities engaging in research and capacity development activities related to global crop improvement with the Feed the Future Innovation Lab for crop improvement. That's our goal for our project. And these are the 4 objectives that are guiding our project right here. We're going to develop a fellowship program. We are going to recruit students from MSI. We are going to develop and engage them in culturally responsive research mentorship, which we talked about. And we're going to develop and engage the mentoring capacity of faculty members associated with the VLC, and even those outside of this, and students, not just at Cornell, but also those at the minority service institutions as well. And this is a summary of the program of activities. We're going to bring in 10 students from MSIs to Cornell. They're going to spend a year here taking coursework and engaging with students, engaging with some of you in this room. It's going to increase opportunities for these students to engage and learn about research, especially students from underrepresented backgrounds. And then again, we have the support appreciated of College of Ag and Life Sciences here, SIPS, and plant-based engineering. So that in a nutshell is what the project is that we're working on with USA. So I'm going to stop there. I have 39 seconds left. I'm going to give you back. And I'll open up with any questions you have related to this, map. Anything is fair game as I share with the students this morning. So thank you for being here.
Yeah, so in our area in agriculture, half the money research is in the USDA ARS, the other half is distributed among the other half. What do you think ARS should, it's engaged very heavily with predominantly white land grants, far less within MSI. What do you think something like ARS could do in this area?
Yeah, so good question. So I think one of the first things that could and should be done is for ARS, the folks at ARS, to engage with those at USA who are clearly committed to what we're trying to do. I mean, this has gone up pretty high within USA. I met with someone 3 weeks ago, high up at USA, and he was making a visit to Purdue Food Safety Innovation Lab, and he was driving down to Illinois, and he made the comment at least 5 or 6 times about how Levon, the work that Cornell and Purdue is doing in the space, people are taking notice. And so my advice would be to have folks at ARS engage with the likes of their counterparts at USA, folks at NEFA, USDA NEFA, who provided the money for the MAP program, 1.0, 2.0, and then the mentor program. Because oftentimes that's how movements are created by having those conversations. I think engaging and then learning as to why USA wants to invest in something like this could be a reason why you change the minds and hearts of folks at ARS. Yeah. Good question, thank you. Go ahead, and I'll go back. Go ahead. I'm sorry for not repeating the question. I'm sorry about that.
That's okay, we'll do it for this
I'll
one.
do it, yeah, thank you. Go ahead. Go ahead, read your question. From MAP program? Yeah. So the question was, has there been any research done with looking at the long-term impacts of the MAP program? Good question. We have actually, and I should have mentioned this, we have, so at the end of the day, I'm a researcher around the faculty, and we have done at least three, if not four research studies, journal articles, peer-reviewed journal pieces, that looked at various components of the MAP program. From a follow study with students who attended the Summer Scholars Program, from the impacts of impressions of the resource guide, two other pieces. You email me, which is right there, I can share with you. Yes, to answer your question, we have done research with that. We've done evaluation studies as well. I have another student who did a study looking at the impact of the seminars or workshops we put on monthly. That's the third piece. There's one more on this. So we have done it, yes. Appreciate that question. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry, I need to go back here, but I'm sorry about that. Go ahead.
I have a question about the Summer Scholars Program.
Yeah.
I saw that it was virtual, it was a 2-day on event. When it was in person, were you able to get everything done also in 2 days?
No, it was, the question is, looking at comparing the virtual format of the Summer Scholars Program versus the in-person version, and what their differences. So to answer your question, the in-person version was 5 days. So we knew we would have to sacrifice some things. I think we did a good job with the virtual version. So the virtual version was about a day and a half, roughly. I would not want to extend it past that. I think we started on a Friday evening, and then ended Saturday around 5 p.m. But you know, a lot of the engagement and activities and things of that nature we couldn't do virtually, right? So that's the reason. So we sacrificed some of those components, but nonetheless, students did find the virtual approach to be highly effective. Nonetheless, good question. Thank you.
Okay, we have some questions coming in from the chat.
Okay.
Great presentation. Will the students from MSI at Cornell can transfer their credits to respective institutions towards their degree? Are you also looking at undergraduate or postgraduate for 1-year training?
So the first part, I'm not deferring for the question, but I'm going to rely on the likes of Steve and Holly and Mike we're trying to figure out the whole notion of how this course sequencing is going to work out for the students, right? That's going to take some time and effort to think through. So we haven't gotten there yet. The second part of the question was with postdocs. Can you repeat the second half of that, please?
Oh, sure.
If you don't mind.
Are you also looking at undergraduates or postgraduates for 1-year training?
We haven't looked at that yet. That's not to say that we won't do in the future. It's a possibility. Right now, we're focusing on engaging students at the MSIs who are master's degree students.
Okay. If nobody has a question, I'm going to answer a few from the chat. That's okay. Has the MSI program had any challenges coming to and working with predominantly white institutions? Have there been any challenges within this MSI student experience?
I assume they're referring to the program, the ILSI project. Is that correct? I assume. When they say
Yeah,
something. Okay. Well, our program hasn't. If you're referring to, appreciate the question. You're referring to the program that we're going to be creating here at Cornell. It hasn't been created yet. Let me say it that way. So I can't answer that question because we haven't even engaged and gone down that road of actually bringing in students on and so forth.
Holly, do you want to answer?
Oh, yeah, Holly, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Levon.
Yeah.
I was just wondering, you talked about the deficiency narrative.
Yeah,
I'm wondering how much of your work is actually challenging the institution itself, like Purdue.
yeah,
Because you talked about, there was a session I noticed on students from MSI adapting to coming to predominantly white institutions.
yeah.
What should they be doing the adapting?
Yeah.
How much of the challenging and change should be happening?
Now, that's actually a really good question.
Can you repeat the question?
Oh, thank you. I'm not doing that personally. I apologize.
Okay.
So the question was, regarding this deficit model, and so one of the flyers I showed that we was focused on this notion of students assimilating, if you will, to the engagement. And the question was, are we as a team pushing back on that narrative and trying to, challenge the system? So I hope I captured that correctly. So how do I want to answer that? So as in my role as the MAP director, we did not engage in that way during my time. However, what I will say is that my current role is Associate Dean of Diversity and Inclusion and Faculty Affairs in the College of Polytechnic Institute now. I'm engaging in that type of work. And for me, it's a byproduct of just my maturity level, just learning from others, and recognizing that in order to really address some of these issues, you have to push against the system, dismantle the system. It's just that simple. So in my current role, I'm going to engage in that space. And as a byproduct of that engagement, I'm then going to feed it back to my colleagues who's leading the MAP program now. Who's taking the lead, let me say it that way, in the MAP program.
So I just had a question. You mentioned the mentor with all capital letters
Yes,
in your
yes.
program. So multi-institutional mentoring network for transforming organizational culture.
Yeah.
So kind of a mishmash of some of the other questions, like how were the goals defined? Were you working together to define those cultural goals across the institutions, because it involved the APCUs as well as the PWIs? And then how was that? I know it was integrated with the MAP program, but how were you evaluating your impact on organizational culture? Were there particular metrics you were going for?
So in terms of, so the question is, regarding the mentor program, how have we been able to structure the conversation such that all institutions involved understand this notion of culture change, and to what degree are we engaging to such that information disseminated so that it's a shared understanding that they can then go back and share with the institutions. So what we do to address that, we bring in speakers, national speakers, to kind of set the tone and tenor behind that. We have monthly workshops with all institutions. So that's where we kind of level set. And then what each of those institutions that I highlighted for you has a faculty leadership team, FLT, which is comprised of at least 3 individuals: a lead, and which is usually a faculty member in all places, a faculty member, I believe, at least 1 administrator, and then another faculty. And these teams range from anywhere from 3 to 5 individuals. And at the end of the day, and so I didn't mention, we are giving these institutions seed grants to develop mentoring programs within their colleges. The first seed grant is $10,000, and the second seed grant is $5,000. And they submit applications, my team reviews it, it's like RFA process, and we give them feedback on their proposals, and then it's up to them to engage those individuals that need to be engaged on their campuses within their colleges to then carry out this mentoring program. That's kind of how. Steve.
In the Biden budget, there was $20 billion proposed to go to HBCU infrastructure improvement. Yesterday, it went from 20 billion to 2 billion in the budget reconciliation. What do administrators at institutions like Cornell or other leaders in higher education need to be doing to affect change?
So the question is, what do institutional leaders at majority institutions like Cornell need to do to affect change in light of, in this case, the reduced budget, which was 20 billion originally, now it's 2 billion, which was going to HBCUs. So what I would say, Steve, I would answer that question is that we need folks like yourself and others who I've been meeting with this week to be at the table to have conversations. So another way to say that is, you know, if we are truly committed to this idea of helping build capacity at minority serving institutions, but in this case, HBCUs, there's some value that can be added by having the voice of folks like yourselves in the room at the table with them when they're having to argue as to why it needs to be north of $2 billion in this case. Speak to how the engagement with Tuskegee and Delaware State and others that we're going to engage with in our project, the value that is bringing to Cornell. I would imagine that if folks at USA, ARS, and others, NSF, say, how that impact is being made at Cornell, you have students engaging with students from MSIs. Because, digress for a second, this morning, one of the students asked me, why is it that Cornell hasn't, from their vantage point, hasn't really engaged in MSI, with MSI? This is an actual student this morning, an hour, 90 minutes ago, asked the question. I responded, but my point is that to the degree that you can be engaged and be an additional voice in this narrative, in this conversation, I think could sometimes sway the conversation so that change could occur. That's how I respond to that.
There's a question from the chat asking about, is there a resource to search across MSIs to find potential faculty collaborators in a particular specialty? I've tried doing this and it's going really slowly that way. And I would actually preface that with not just contacts, but is there a bunch of resources that could be built or provided to encourage, to make that connection a lot easier and avoid those pitfalls that you talked about?
Yeah. So there's no magic list that exists. The list, like if I use the example of a project that Haley Oliver and her leadership of the Visual Lab, that was a list we created. So what I would say is that oftentimes individuals at various institutions will have their own connections that they'll use. But usually that's focused on one or two institutions. They don't have access to the 16, 17 within the land, the other 730 MSIs that exist across the country. So what can happen is introductions can be made from folks like Steve and myself and Mike and Haley and others, so colleagues can do those introductions, be at the table, and then once you get things settled, then you can step away. The advantage that Steve has and Haley in this case is that I'm a part of the work that they're doing, so they have access to my access, right? 730 doesn't matter, and you all have access too. You want access, it doesn't matter. But I think this introduction is no sort of introducing and being engaged, and then once you see that things are coming together, then you can buy out and then say, okay, now you're on your own. So.
Any other questions from the audience?
Yes. Yeah.
I guess so that people were reached by that, and I guess I'm wondering if you guys go through these kind of workshops and people who are already thinking about that they want to improve their mentoring skills, and if there's ways that you're willing to make it harder to reach.
Yeah. Really good question. So the question is, in reference to the number I shared earlier of the 2,000 or so people that were reached by our seminars and workshops, and the fact that those that attend, probably the majority of which are the ones that are already doing the work, right? How do you engage others? We haven't tracked that, number one. What I have learned and what I'm embarking on now in my new role is this notion, Chelsea, this would be good, we can have a discussion about this, is this notion of truly integrating DEI across everything we do. So let me give you an example. when you think in terms of diversity and inclusion, it usually rests on recruitment of faculty, recruitment of students, undergrad and grad, recruitment of staff. You rarely focus on the retention aspect, almost rarely ever. That's number one. Number two, when you think of DEI, how it can be integrated into some of our teaching, you have culturally relevant pedagogy. That's just one example. You can connect culturally relevant pedagogy to mentoring. So you can integrate it and connect it to teaching. You can integrate it to the research by having diverse participants, working with MSIs on projects. You can engage and integrate DEI into extension and outreach activities. And so as I thought about this in my role, I said to myself, I said, why is it that in 12 years in the College of Ag at Purdue, we've never had a conversation about integrating DEI across everything we do? Marketing, academic advising, graduate research mentoring. I mean, I can go on, I have like 10 areas of this. And so one of my 4 goals in my new position is to work at this notion of integration across everything we do, such that it's so second nature that there's no need to, folks who aren't interested still won't engage. That's fine. I can't bring everyone to the water trouble, if you will. But what I will try to do is to make sure that people understand how it can be integrated to everything that we do. Advising, teaching, research, marketing, academic advising, study abroad, all those things. There are connection points across every area, everyone. We've never had those conversations. Not one time have we had those conversations. And I can assure you that there's no college at Purdue that is engaged in that conversation as I speak here today. That's how we're going to do it moving forward, at least in the Polytechnic.
Looks like the rest of the questions are more kind of future vision. So how does the relationship with ILSI MSI program and what can you describe the relationship with ILSI MSI program will have with MSI PI of the selected graduate students? So
yeah, so how, you already read the question. She got me so in tune to ask. Good, really good. So this is going to occur through our engagement, my team's engagement, our team's engagement with our institutions, having conversations. So in this ILSI MSI program, we are making sure that, so we're going to have these 10 students coming from these MSIs to Cornell. We are making sure that that student's advisor at their own institutions is engaged in this process throughout. They understand the course sequence they're going to be engaged in. We are also, as I mentioned earlier, training those MSI faculty members in our mentorship education program. So from this outset, we're going to make sure that they're engaged the whole step of the way. Because at the end of the day, right, these students are going to return back to their home institutions. And we don't want students returning back and the advisor says, "What did you do this summer? How's it going?" No, we're not doing that. So we're going to make sure that they're engaged on this whole process.
great. Another future kind of question is about the partnership between Cornell and Cal's and the MSI grad students. How did that come about? And who are the program champions? Do you imagine this program will continue to grow to other colleges beyond Cal's?
Simple answer, yes. Right? No, I didn't finish answering the question. You all inspired me this morning when I was in the meeting. I shared this seat as I was meeting with the graduate students. So there were 7 in the room. They asked me a lot of questions. Time the clock starts being really good. So kudos to your shout out to your advisors in this room. Good job. But as I was listening to you all this morning, I said this to you. I said that I want to see students like yourselves, others. It's going to be important for you to engage with those 10 students that come from there. You all can be difference makers in these students' lives. They connect with folks like yourself, and they will say, "Wow, there really are some good people at Cornell who want to see you be successful." So I think that it's important, Haley and Mike and others in this room, that to whatever degree we can make sure that these 10 students, 10 fellows engage with the likes of the 2 of you and others, that's going to be important. I responded, but I didn't respond to the second question. I wanted to make sure I got that off my plate, if you don't mind, sorry.
Okay, actually, you just answered this last question.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you're
Okay,
good.
good.
So who are the program champions? How do you imagine
Oh.
this program growing beyond other colleges, beyond Cal?
So, I don't know how if Steve will retire and others, I don't want to keep him around forever, but my hope is that it can be expanded. I had conversations with folks in the grad school this morning who clearly see the value of the program, right? That's obvious to them. And I think it's safe to say that when we do this project, we carry out this project to success, that USA will come back and say, well, let's expand it.
Mhm.
Here's some more money, right? So I do think we have that, and it's clear to me that the folks I've talked to something here, that there are opportunities to expand this program to whether other colleges want to mimic, if you will, something similar, engaging more students, because we're having, even though this project is focused under this umbrella of plant sciences, if we have students who are interested, who have that interest in their interest intersects with plant science, whether it be sociology, economics, health and well-being, those sorts of things, those students in other colleges will still be part of this 10 fellows group. So I do think naturally that, other colleges can be expanded. But it's going to take conversations and folks who are here at Cornell on my behalf, talking with folks like yourself and others to engage you and show you the value and the benefit of engaging. But I think it could be a huge, when it's all said and done, this project could be a huge, could really add value to Cornell and Cal. I really believe in it. And I'm speaking from the perspective of someone who has built a program, that being the math program. We were right on that after. I think it was going to be what it is today. I'm an eternal optimist. I was always confident in our ability. But when I look back now over the last 10 years, the things we've done, and we have to have those key players, as you mentioned, folks that are committed, have to have folks that are committed. And I shared yesterday with Mike and others, if they run across folks that aren't committed to this idea, then they don't need to participate. Because you can't have just even one detractor to take us off the tracks. And that's something that you just can't afford to do.
Thank you. Any last questions before we break? Okay, let's give Dr. Esters another round of applause.
This has been a production of Cornell University, on the web at cornell.edu.